Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find the links in the podcast description. I have 4 other podcasts: the Awakening Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, the Meditation Podcast, and the Crypto Podcast, and all can be found on rycon.com. Today, my guest, please welcome Ryan Lindner. Did I do it right? Because I know the D is kind of silent.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, no problem. So you might let the listeners know who's Ryan.
Sure. I've been a coach for quite a long time, many years. I specialize mostly in transitions. So, to give you an example, I've worked a lot with the military, and when you've been in a role for 20, 30 years and you decide to retire, that's who are you then, and what do you do next? So, I help a lot with transitions. I help a lot with people with busyness, really getting unstuck, seeing their blind spots, things like that. So I've been a coach for many years, also a trainer. I've traveled the country. I've done all kinds of webinars on all different topics, helping people really perform at their best. So it's really performance. It's really about seeing their blind spots. And yeah, that's a bit about me.
Okay, excellent. And I know you've done, I have it written down there, it's like 6,000 sessions for the military. Were you in the military yourself, or was it just something that you kind of landed to work for the military?
Yeah, I wasn't actually, but it was certainly a pleasure to work with the service members. And I've since branched out. I've worked with organizations as well, a lot of organizations really around the world, developing programs, developing educational content, working with staff. And again, it's all about performance, being their best, working on their skills. So real performance heavy. But yeah, that was never served, but happy to serve those who serve.
Exactly. No, brilliant. And I know you had at an early age, you had a health issue that kind of, because I looked at and you've been coaching a long time. It's kind of, because sometimes I see a lot of this guests that come on, it's kind of like, they make a transition and it's like they're at it 2 years, but you seem to have kind of picked coaching for a long time. And I don't know, was it connected to what happened you guys?
Well, initially I started my career in wellness. So a lot of physical health. And then I sort of got into organizational wellness. In other words, how does being well affect performance at the workplace? And then from there, the trajectory was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm enjoying helping people perform their best in terms of their work and their performance. And then I said, well, I've heard about this coaching thing. Let me look into that. And I loved it, helping people really explore. It's so different from counseling in that, we don't dig so much into the past pains. We're more, okay, this is where you are now. And so what's going to serve you in the future? How do we move forward? What's got you stuck? And I'm just sort of the catalyst. I'm someone who can ask the right questions and get you to kind of explore within yourself. But yeah, the health challenge came later, actually. I was already a working coach, and actually I had a contract, and I was there for maybe a month or two. And I had 2 cardiac arrests, just random. And no family history. And of course, I told you I've been in wellness. So, I eat well, I sleep well. I try to, the self-care is a big factor. And, I just was walking along one day and there you have it. I had I received CPR, and then the following day I had another cardiac arrest. And what's interesting, well, I guess that's interesting there, but, I was so new. I didn't have any accrued, I didn't have paid time off. I didn't, my health insurance hadn't kicked in yet. So I was back at work 5 days later. Yeah. And what happened though, was that it changed the dynamic of the sessions. Because, a lot of my sessions have been virtual over the years. Most of them, actually. I've done, mostly telephonic coaching, virtual coaching. And so I would be in a session and they couldn't necessarily see me. And so I had, I was connected to these wires and monitors and things. And it transformed the sessions. I mean, I remember sitting there and I'm listening to this lady and she's going on and on about these problems. And I was really like teetering on consciousness at the time. And I really shouldn't have been working, but I needed the money at the time. And, sometimes, and I'm sure, people out there can relate. Sometimes you make choices, you're in a tough spot and you make choices that are, you think are best for you. But it really did change the dynamic of sessions moving forward, because, I'm just trying to stay conscious and she's talking about these really everyday minor things. And over the years since, it's been over a decade now, ever since, I've participated in some studies, and that's a big part of what I do, is look at patterns in people. And one thing I've found is that people cannot see themselves. I've had psychologists as clients, generals. I mean, people, it's not intelligence, it's not any of those things. People cannot see themselves a lot, and we're all just people, right? So, we don't see these everyday problems that sort of, keep us stuck, and we don't see how we keep ourselves stuck, but yeah, it really changed the dynamic of the sessions ever since. And I'm dizzy 24/7. I have a condition that really makes me, dizzy, and I have to really prioritize my energy. I have to have boundaries. I have to prioritize self-care. I must do those things that a lot of people don't tend to prioritize, because if I don't, I get sick. So yeah, self-care and really taking care of yourself is so important, and people take it for granted, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it kind of frustrates me that in America, where they have the best technology for the medical industry, I have heard so many cases like that. For you should have been off 3 to 6 months at least for something like that. And the fact, that you're not covered for something like that. I mean, and I saw it recently, just this week, some lady, she, after 12 days after giving birth, had to go back to work. And when you see that, it's like, and I've heard I remember a friend that worked for me here. She used to go to America because she used to make a lot of money as a server in a restaurant for the summers. And she was saying that somebody, they destroyed their hand, but they wouldn't go because they couldn't afford it. They chopped their finger. I didn't know what, and it was just kind of taping.
Wow,
and I was like, that is so weird, because everybody looks as if America would be one of the best for the thing. And the reality is, it's a sick industry the way that they do it. It's all about the money, and it's all about crushing, the individual.
It is. And there are a lot of professions out there that don't offer regular benefits, and I think of oftentimes being a server is one of those. And yeah, I mean, a lot of professions, it's pretty standard that your benefits don't kick in for about 90 days or so. So there's the question for a lot of workers out there, what do you do until then? I did have a temporary policy that I purchased at the time, but yeah, it's tough for families in transitions. It is. And this was years ago. But yeah, it was a tough time, and it was difficult to make a choice that wasn't necessarily best for my health per se. But I felt like I didn't have a choice at the time. So
yeah. And like, what with the speaking then, because like with the coach, I mean, you actually mentioned psychologists, that you would have coached them. I actually prefer your method, where you're kind of looking at somebody where they are and where they can make it. Because I know that some psychologists, they basically have people with them for 10 and 20 years. And to me, that's an industry. It's like a solicitor trying to drag your case on for 10 years just to make their wallet big and yours a bit thinner.
yeah, well, when I was new in the industry, it was really strange for me to have, like, say, a psychologist, and I've had counselors, I've had all kinds of executives and all kinds of people. But when I had my first psychologist as a client, I thought, this is strange, because I just assumed they would have it all figured out. But I realized very quickly, we are just people, and we can help someone else, but again, not see ourselves. And I've worked alongside, counselors, and it was funny. I ran into a counselor once that I knew pretty well, and He was explaining to me, he was actually a couples counselor, like a marriage and family therapist. And he said something, and I never forgot it. He looks at me and he says, yeah, I'm just about to do a couples session. Yeah, right after a major fight with the wife. And I thought, I just, something about the way he said it really, like, I thought, wow, I guess we're all just people trying to make it, I guess, you know.
Exactly. And like from my experience from talking to people, a lot of the therapists got into studying that because they had issues themselves. And that's how, so they're kind of, because they've been cured of a certain thing that happened to them, then they feel that's their calling in life.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's why I think I love transitions. They're tough for people. It helps people get out of I help people get out of their comfort zone. I help them make sometimes scary choices, courageous choices. I help a lot with boundaries, with self-care, and I that's all me. I mean, that's all stuff I've needed. I have to have boundaries. I have to have self-care. The comfort zone and all that, I've been an introvert my entire life. In fact, and a lot of my clients would not guess it because I don't seem introverted. I think the difference is I'm not necessarily shy. And people don't understand there's such a big difference. And I know you've talked about this before in other episodes. But yeah, there's such a difference between shyness and introversion. And not afraid to chat with strangers or anything, but I am so introverted most of the time, way more so than any of my clients, and they would never guess. In fact, on tests like the Myers-Briggs, I'm like off the chart. I'm like 100%. I just recharge my batteries a certain way. What energizes some people drains me, and again, it comes back to the boundaries. But I have such a soft spot for working with introverts, with shy people, with people suffering from anxiety, with those types of things. And that brought me to the public speaking and that kind of thing is really, how can we get out of our comfort zones in a way that is best for us, even if we're introverted or, struggling with something.
And I know you've done, is it 4 webinars daily for about a year or something like that? You've done a load of webinars, yeah?
I don't do that so much today, but for about a good year or two, up until I would say December, it was about a 4+ daily.
And how long were the webinars?
I would say anywhere 30 minutes to an hour. They weren't super long.
Still, that's a lot of energy, because I mean, I've often done 3 podcasts in a day, and I find, I've done up to 5, but it takes a lot out of you because you have to put in the energy as well to.
Absolutely, you're right. And I think with webinars, people think, well, webinars I think the assumption is they must be easier, but to me, you've got to consider other things like tech issues people are having. You're also a tech support person because people are, as they're like, texting you or entering into the chat issues they're having. Oh, I can't hear. And, you've got an audience there waiting, and you've got to be a tech support person for this person. And you have to monitor the chat. It's a totally different way of facilitating. And then, back when I was I don't do a whole lot of one-on-one sessions anymore. I do more groups, organizations, things like that. But when I was doing one-on-ones, I think the max amount of one-on-one sessions I did in a day was maybe like 12 or 13. And those were, sometimes they were shorter, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But that's so many. And I never did it again because I was like, no. And the sessions suffer, if you're doing that many, you just don't have as much energy towards the end of the day. But, I would get sick, and so, that's really all time management is, really. It's just the management of your own energy. That's it. That's all
you listen to your body. I mean, I know
that you have to,
like, because I tend to do mine early up to maybe 5 o'clock, but the odd time, like yesterday, I done one at 8 because there was such a time difference. And I just know that I'm not it's not my time. Like, it's, I prefer to do it within a certain time, but also when I done 3 in a row, I just knew I didn't give the person justice, because I mean, when a guest is coming on to me, I do the research. I spend at least an hour on each person, preparing it and everything. And it's like, I felt my energy levels wasn't the same. So now when I've got, say, 2, I put out a block of rest to make sure that somebody else can come in and book it.
Yeah, I feel like presence, like true presence with someone, is really a gift you give them, because most people are not fully present. They're sort of halfway here, and then the rest of them is in the past or the future. And I've seen this, tracking patterns in clients over the years. Most people are always in the future, sort of future anxiety about, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, and 2 o'clock, I got to do this, and then they're sort of only halfway with you. And so, most people tend to be more transactional and not interactional. And people can feel that. They can really feel if you're present with them. So I think, it's my responsibility to make sure I have enough energy to really be there and sort of listen, and really listen and hear them. And all that, it does require energy. It really does.
I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn, and he, like, I remember years ago reading, wherever you are, be there. And it's like, the person that's in, and I've seen that, and I mean, I've been through that journey as well. You're in work wishing you were at home with the kids. When you're at home with the kids, you're thinking of the job you have to do, and it's like, that's how I believe I get so much done. I've gone, you have to go through some sort of thing in life, I believe, to make that transition. But just be fully present. Like later now, I'm going collecting my son. I'm going to take him to like an indoor theme park. I'll be just totally present with him. I won't be thinking about anything else. I won't be on my phone. And just do that same with breakfast and everything. Just be present, and you'd be surprised how much more enjoyable life becomes.
You made such a good point. And I remember someone, I worked at a big wellness center once, and a man walked in, and he said something like, doesn't sound so crazy, but I remember this was like 15 years ago. And he walks in and he says, "How are you?" And he stopped. And people say that every day. How are you? Good. You? How are you? Good. How are you? But it's never a real question, right? It's a pleasantry, right? We're not given a real answer, but we're used to that. We're used to that transactional type of interactions with people. But the way he said it, I felt it, that he was asking me, like, he wanted to know like how I actually was. And it caught me off guard at first, but we're not used to that. People can feel it even if they don't know. Because what do people say when, how are you? Good. How are you? How are you hanging in there? How are you? Not too bad. And I talk about that all the time. And it always intrigues me how people have these automatic reactive sort of responses, and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. How are you? Oh, it's Monday. How are you? Hanging, they just say these things. Even in their emails, they'll, at least over where I am in sort of that corporate world, most people sign their emails regards. I don't know if you've encountered that, but they sign it regards. And I thought, regards? To me, that sounds so cold and like distant, and we don't speak that way. So imagine telling someone regards, like, I always laugh. And, I've talked to colleagues about that, and, people sign their emails also like respectfully, like, and my colleague and I, we were kind of joking, and we were signing our emails to each other like very disrespectfully, Ryan, like, but people notice two things about you in an impression right away. Number one is they get a sense of your competence, but the other thing that people notice in an impression right away is your warmth. That's how you really connect with people. You're present with them, but they notice your warmth right away. And most people, I think, miss that, particularly in corporate work culture. They miss that aspect of it, that we're all just people.
I have to review. I've never said regards, but I say kind regards or warm regards. I always, but now that you say it, I never say that in a conversation. And it's like, what way? I'm actually like, what way should I actually write it? Because you're dead right. It's strange. And just going back to what you said about, a lot of people, when you go up to them and you go, hey, or you're in a store and they go, hey, how are you? I remember in America when I was there, somebody said, and I went to reply and I just thought to myself, they don't care. But in Ireland, trust me, go to Ireland, it's different there. When someone
I bet it is.
They kind of engage in the conversation, they're having the crack and everything. So I wasn't used to that. But when I went to the States, and it happened a few times. And I just kind of realized, nobody, same in a lift or everything was kind of, there's no heart in it. It was just kind of words.
You're right. I do think it's more unique to the States. I do. And yeah, it's people, and imagine giving them a real answer. Now I would never say something like, oh, I'm terrible. It's a terrible day, because people would look at you funny, but I do try to give them a somewhat of an actual real answer. Like, oh, it's a little chilly out, but it's a good day. I try to be positive about it, but I do try to give them a real answer. And with emails too. I mean, I think it's okay to say warm regards as long as you mean it, I guess. It's, I always try to say something like, if I sign it, thank you, which I do a lot. I actually really am intending to thank them for something. Otherwise I just sign my name. I mean, we don't need anything else.
I think it's come from when I was working in art, because you'd always send demons, but honestly, I've never thought of it till now. So I thank you for that. I will be changing. There won't be no more regards. It'll be thank you, or because sometimes I'd even say the thank you, and then after it's like I feel like I have to. So I mean, sometimes we should kind of evaluate the things we're doing, because we've been doing them from a habit, or because it's been passed down from generation. So I don't know.
Those are the blind spots I talk about when I'm working with people. The blind spots. People, we do things as people that we don't even realize, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It's just that we're so busy. We're more reactive, and everyone is. One moment they're reacting to the last moment, and it's every day is just this endless reaction. And that presence, I mean, people intellectually mindfulness is a big thing now, but people really aren't necessarily always applying it. They do struggle with it, and it sometimes takes a trauma or something big to really get people to really reevaluate their lives, right? It's like, no one has problems in the ICU or the hospital, right? Their problem is the hospital, but they're not worried about mowing the grass or whatever other little tiny problem they had. And most of the time, it takes a trauma for people to really be present in their lives, where they say, whoa, what am I actually doing here? And sometimes never. But for me, that was definitely the case, is when I had that sort of, those events that I had, those health crises, it really made me look at things differently. And I think I try to help people without hopefully they don't need a trauma to really do that, but it's more about exploring what will actually work. And most of the time in the self-help industry, people treat the symptom and not the cause. So in other words, you have a hoarder. You can send an organizational specialist in there. You can help them get organized. You can help them clean up, but they're going to hoard again in a week because you haven't treated the reason why they're hoarding. And so, I think the key is really looking at your life and saying, all right, well, what's going to actually create change here, and really addressing that,
I think I'm always conscious of that, because I look at everything, like say homelessness, and they're all going, let's help the homelessness. And it's not. No, go back a few steps. What actually caused it? It was the city that basically, because they didn't get their property tax, which is illegal anyway, they kick out somebody, and there's even say, if you get a rash on your arm, let's put a cream on your arm, and then you get a side effect, something else. The cream is nothing to do with it. They never ask you what caused that rash on your arm. And everything is like that. You just have to go back a few layers, and I believe we can fix any problem in the world. But we have to remove a few layers first of all, and then things will be better. But I'm seeing more and more people are actually becoming conscious and more present. I'm having a lot more conversations with people. You just know it, that they're in a different zone. You know, they kind of they're obviously present, but they respect every day, they respect every hour, they respect what's going on.
And I know you talk a lot about like speaking and you know, introversion and sort of having that confidence. And I think that's when people who are introverts, they really get in their head too much, and that's the problem, is they tend to overthink it, they tend to overanalyze it. And I think the worst, if you have something that creates stress or anxiety, it's the lead up to it. And I think it's important to understand that they're just people you're talking to. That's it. They're just people. And I think a couple things that have really helped me is, number one is, and I've encountered this a lot with introverts, with people that suffer from anxiety and things like that, is we spend our lives thinking that we have to do something to reverse it or to remedy that, as if it's a problem, right? Like, I'm an introvert and I have anxiety, and so what can I do about that? And what can I do to fix it, right? And they spend their whole lives thinking it's something that needs to be fixed. And that's not true. I think, and I've seen this time and time again, and also with myself, is once you own it, once you own something about you and you even love it, the fear dissipates, it dissolves a little bit. And suddenly what you were afraid about is almost gone. And if you take a look and say, hey, I'm an introvert, and not only do I not want to change that, but I love it. I love it about myself. And I have grown to love it. And there are a lot of advantages to being an introvert. And I've seen a lot of introverts make fantastic leaders as well. They tend to be introspective. They tend to think things through very thoroughly. They tend to be emotionally very controlled in general. And once you own it and feel like, you know what, I'm happy to be introvert, don't even want to change it, then the fear, I think, again, sort of dissolves a bit. So I feel like you have to own it and not always want to change it.
No, definitely. And I want to touch on the coaching, but I just back on the webinars, actually, because you mentioned, engaging. How did you actually do that? Because I know a lot of people, they do webinars for, say, lead generation to get, the funnel, whether it's for coaching or speaking or whatever they're selling. But how did you keep your focus? Like, did you just kind of talk as you saw the comment, or what was your strategy?
I had a framework that I like to work in. In other words, like, it wasn't scripted per se, but it was like, I had done so many, I think, that I just knew, I had done just so many that I knew like how to respond in different situations, and I had confidence in that. And every webinar was different, but I think having being relaxed and knowing that the stakes were pretty low, it keeps you mentally. A lot of times in a webinar, if there's a mistake or something doesn't happen as planned, a lot of times the attendee or they don't even know it, and they don't care really. The only person that cares is the person running the webinar. So, if something goes wrong and you make a joke of it, or you just make a quick little joke, or you say, oh, something technical happens, or you're managing, just call it out. Just be a person. And suddenly it gets way, way easier. If you're stuffy and you're robotic and you're scripted and all that, people can feel that, and you sound more nervous. So if you just relax You're just talking to people. But yeah, to answer your question, I did have I had a plan, kind of like, hey, I'm going to cover these points, and and this is the time where I normally ask if there's questions. This is the time where I seek engagement or try something new or something, a poll or something. But mostly it is just, I think what's helped the most is just being present in it and just relaxing. That's kind of a general answer, but I think just the relaxing and not sticking too hard to the script.
And because I know that sometimes when you get into these, sometimes unfortunately people go off on a tangent with their comments and they're not even paying attention. And do you call that out, or do you just ignore it?
I have found, though, sometimes you're right. If it's a tangent, I know exactly what you're asking. I think it's it can be difficult, I think, when you, and I learned this the hard way, when I first started, and I had some really bad webinars when I first started. I'm really clunky, sort of just, and I was nervous. But sometimes if you address those tangents, a lot of presenters try to address the comments as they go, but then it takes them on this endless tangent, and suddenly they spent 20 minutes talking about something else that took them away from the presentation. So I think that's a decision you have to begin with is, I can, if it's a really small group, if it's only 2 people, 3 people, if it's like a small little intimate group, then absolutely you can maybe handle that. But I think the bigger the group, I think it's best just to save those questions for a particular time. And remember, it's your show, it's your show, it's your presentation. And if someone's got some off the rails questions, or they're taking you somewhere else, address what you want to. Or you can also, reach out to them individually. If it's something really in depth, you can reach out to them later, but you control the pace. But yeah, I would not allow anyone to take you off on some tangent. And call it out to answer your question. Say, that's a great question. I'd love to address that. I think for the purposes of helping everyone on the call for time, or you can answer it in the way you want to. But tangents, oh man, that can lead you on the down a rabbit hole that never ends.
Exactly. And would you actually make a recording and send them the recording, or did you find have you played with that to see advantages and disadvantages of sending, the recording after the call?
I have. I did that for a long time. That's what I did, was I sent the recording. I think it can be helpful doing that. That way they can review it, and anything that was helpful, they can go back and rewatch it. And I did try that. And yeah, I think it was, I like doing that. I like doing that. I think, it's super helpful. On the flip side, I think if people know they're getting a recording, sometimes they might zone out a little more or leave early or something like that, knowing they're just going to get the recording anyway. So I think it's pros and cons to it. But, if I have a really engaged group, that I recommend feeling out the group first and determining, how they are, what their energy level is. And if a group is really engaged and they're, they're really having a good time, most likely a recording will help, because they're just going to review and it's going to help them.
Okay. Excellent. So with the coaching, your behavioral stress coach and the busyness coach. So one, I want to ask about kind of the marketing of that. Do you have, Ryan that has the coach and you kind of delist the service, or do you kind of have them as separate things to, find the clients for that niche?
I would say they're not separate things. It's kind of, no one size fits all. It's kind of whatever a client needs. And again, right now I do a lot of more content creation groups, stuff like that, more now than I used to. But yeah, it's not, and I even do a lot of, because transitions, I do even more career oriented coaching as well. But yeah, it's kind of tailoring it to the client, I think.
Okay. And because I know that some coaches do the video and others don't? Which format do you use, and what's the reasons behind it?
For about 5 years, this was a long time ago too, before it was such a big, video was more popular. It was all telephonic, so it was all telephone. So it's you have people who are really big advocates of video and people who really don't like it at all. And a lot of people I've encountered prefer the video because they say, hey, you can connect better with the person. For me, though, if you are only used to the phone, and for years your clients are only used to the phone, something happens to your listening because you can't look at their body language, you can't read them as well. So you are really listening to things like tone, you're reading between the lines, you're really listening because you have to, because it's all you have. And I also think there's a certain anonymity there where, and I'm picturing like clients, maybe they can be comfortable. They can lay on the couch or lay in their bed and be comfortable and wear sweatpants and not have to worry about how they appear, especially if they're struggling with things like shyness or anxiety. It's a less anxiety inducing experience at times, because again, there's anonymity there, and I think there's a feeling of less judgment in times because no one can see them. If they're struggling with weight or with anything that makes them self-conscious, it's just a warm voice on the other end and they're not judged. So I do think there are advantages to not using video. And again, I've worked with so many people without video and with success. So I don't know that I could say absolutely yes, video. I don't know. I think I can make a strong case for no video, actually.
Oh, to be honest, you did, and I get what you said, and no, it's a wonderful points, and I think a lot of people will actually get benefit from that. So, finally, you've written a book. The book is finished, is it? It
is. It's not released yet. It's on pre-order. It is released on April 19th. And it's really it's called The Half-Known Life. And that's actually, people kind of ask me about the title sometimes, but it's actually a quote from Moby Dick. But I view it as sort of the ignorance of ourselves. In other words, like we can't see ourselves type of thing. And it's really about those patterns and behaviors that we don't see. And I talk a lot about my near-death experience in terms of how that affected and relationships, and how those types of things change lives, and how even though we intellectually know, people will say they know what's important in their lives, they know what's a priority, but they don't reflect it in their behaviors. They don't do that on a daily basis, right? I mean, if you sit in a coffee shop and listen to people, they're usually talking about this minor, everyday problem stuff. And, or here, I think a lot more in the US anyway, for sure, a little less relaxed perhaps, but it's really about exploring ourselves and living our best lives and looking at what we can't see.
Excellent. So, Ryan, how can people get in contact with you?
They can go to my website, rslindner.com, and they can access my social media there as well. So it's rslindner, so LINDNER.com, rslindner.com, or they can go to my book site, which is halfknownlifebook.com, either of those two sites.
Okay, perfect. And then make sure I put all the links in the podcast description, both the audio and the video. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, Ryan.
I did as well. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends. Lots of tips on this episode, so they'll benefit from it. Until next week, take care.